typing under duress or something?
I wasn't the tactical officer, I was the armoury officer.
Oh, well, excuse me, I do apologise.
3 greatest names in television.
Richard Dean Anderson.
Aw, look at you.
When you make a film, you don't know which ones are going to be classics and which aren't.
G'day everyone and welcome to the Trekzone Spotlight. For the last time in this studio, I'm going to be building a new one in the next couple of weeks. Matt Miller with you, and I'm continuing Oz Comic Con Melbourne coverage. Joining me from the media room down there right now is Rene. Oh, I should have asked you how to pronounce your name.
He should have checked. He can't pronounce my name, see?
Rene Auberjoinous? Aubergine.
You sort of fell off the cliff there. It's Auberjoinous, Rene Auberjoinous.
Rene Auberjoinous. Will you join me? Thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here.
You've just come off the plane?
I have indeed, yes.
Literally straight to the hotel.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Fantastic. Well, I do appreciate it. Let's get started. I do believe that you have some interesting links with history with your great-great-great-great-grandfather being the King of Naples during the First French Empire.
I think, actually I read it in Wikipedia that it's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Joachim Murat, the King of Naples, brother-in-law to Napoleon. He was one of his generals or marshals, married to Napoleon's sister Caroline, and who was eventually killed in a firing squad.
Wow.
So I hope that doesn't happen to me.
I don't think it will. But with those French roots, you studied high school in London before moving back to the US to graduate college. That's a very diverse background. Has it shaped how you perform as an actor?
Well, sure. I was very, very influenced by British theatre and British actors in general. I always wanted to be a character actor, and I always wanted to be able to do a really diverse kind of work. When I was growing up and preparing to have a career in show business, in the United States at that time, you were either a stage actor or a film actor or a TV actor. But in England, I saw actors working in every form, and it just the thing to do was to act, and that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I've been blessed with being able to do all my life.
Now, I believe in 1968, at the very beginning of your career, you were performing in 3 plays at once?
3 plays? Oh, in 1968, I was part of a repertory company in San Francisco, the American Conservatory Theater, and I would say that I was in probably, I could sit here and count them now, but at least 8 plays at once. Wow. Sometimes running from one, we had 2 theaters, and sometimes I would run from one theater doing a small bit or an entrance bit in one play, and then running and then doing Tartuffe and playing Tartuffe, and it was an extraordinary, crazy time, and it was great training for me as an actor. It really taught me how to trust my instincts, and that served me very well throughout my life.
Rene, you have such an amazing resume. There just isn't enough time to keep going, except, of course, to mention that you won a Tony Award, were nominated 3 more times, and then you moved into movies, starring in the movie version of MASH, as well as Batman Forever, Brewster McCloud, the first remake of King Kong, Where the Buffalo Roam, Inspector Gadget, and so many others. Is there a charm of movies over Broadway and theatre and TV, or is it an equal medium?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the result the work that I have to do as an actor is basically the same work. You adjust it up or down depending on the audience, whether it's the lens that you're playing to or a big audience. But basically, my craft is my craft. I would say that in the beginning of my career, the theater was what I really was trained for and what I was interested in and what I thought was the highest calling. And I would not be telling you the truth if I didn't tell you that at this point in my life, the concept of doing 8 performances a week of the same play, perhaps on Broadway for a year, is not as not as enthralling as it once was. So I do enjoy. I enjoy the specificity required for acting in front of the lens. I love being able to do the kind of larger than life things that one is able to do on the stage, but the truth is now at my age, my advanced age, I am really enjoying the puzzle of working and being very, very specific.
Which brings us to Star Trek, obviously probably the main reason that you're here. Your first foray into the franchise was as Colonel West in The Undiscovered Country. He was a little bit more aggressive than a typical Starfleet officer that we'd seen up to that point. He was quite opposed to the peace conference, and he was even part of the assassination plot.
That's real Trek talk, and deeper than I. You know, when Nick Meyer, the writer and director of The Undiscovered Country, was a friend, and he called and he said, I'm asking a lot of my colleagues and friends to come in and do cameos, and this is not a big part, but I think you might have fun. And would you be interested in doing it? Now, of course, I knew Star Trek. Who wouldn't? I mean, I would have had to be buried underground not to know about Star Trek. But I wasn't a Trekkie or Trekker, but Nick, I knew Nick, and I loved, and I know that Chris Plummer was going to be in it. I had worked with him on Broadway for a year, and so it was all very appealing. But I really didn't have any idea, and I didn't know the history of it. I went for my first, for my costume fitting for a Starfleet officer, and I had by that point in my life, because I was already mid-career or beyond, I'd been in a lot of costume fittings, and it was very nice, and nice uniform and everything. And at the end of it, the costume designer said, "Boy, you're in for it now." And I really didn't, it didn't click in my mind what it meant to be put into a Starfleet officer's uniform, and the incredible impact that would have in terms of the audience that cares about these kind of things. And then, and I did my role, and as you said, because Nick called me right before the film came out, and he said, we had to really cut back on the role because of editing things, and I said, "Nick, that's okay," because I had originally said to him, I said, "Nick, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it, but if I get a real job, I might not be available," meaning a real job, meaning a big role or a television series or something that would preclude my working for, I think, a couple of days, 3 days maybe on the film. So I did it, and then he called to say that it had been edited way down, and that in the initial script I was in a Klingon describe, and I tried to assassinate, and he shot and he falls down, and they changed all that, and I never saw the film. I didn't go to see it, not because I was insulted or didn't care. It just didn't fit into my life at that point. I just didn't have the time. I was busy doing other stuff, and so I never saw it. And then I was cast as Odo, and we were shooting the pilot. I've told this story before, so stop me if I'm boring you. But so we were shooting the pilot, and Colm Meaney, who had been in the Next Gen, and was in our cast, came up to me while we were shooting it, and he said, I'm supposed to do a convention in Chicago, but I'm not going to be able to get there. Would you step in for me? And I said, well, but they won't know who I am. They won't know any. He said, trust me, they'll know more about it than you do. And so I went and did it. And I must say, when I walked out in front of the audience, I was very nervous. I'd never done one of these conventions before. And the audience was very polite and welcoming. But I could tell there was from the tenor of the questions, I could tell there was a little bit of sense of resistance to the fact that if they knew me at all, they knew me as a character that I played on a sitcom, Benson, in which I played a kind of a nitwit chief of staff, effete, kind of silly guy. And so I think for the people in the audience, the Trekkers in the audience, there were some of them who were thinking, how is this guy going to get to play, I mean, a major role in a new Star Trek franchise? But I was winning them over slowly but surely. And then someone asked me a question about what was it like to play Colonel West. Now, I knew that, well, the first thing is I didn't remember that was the name of my character. And I thought they must have been talking about Wild Wild West, because I had done a couple of movies for television based on a series called Wild Wild West. And so I thought they were talking about that, and I started to talk about that, and I didn't know what they were talking about. And the audience, I could feel like he didn't even know what he had played. And then I went, oh. But I said, but I thought it was cut out of the movie. How could you even know that? And they said, no, it's in the video. So, but I apparently now, in the Blu-rays, again, it's put back to the way it was in the movie theaters, but I don't know.
Well, I guess I came across as a real Trekkie there with that technical question. Do you get that a lot at conventions and when you're sitting on panels?
Oh, absolutely. But now, please, I've been doing this now we started Deep Space Nine in '93. And you do the math, that's a number of years now, and I've been doing a great many of these conventions. I do them, honestly, I do them now, and really from the pretty close to the beginning of it, I do them to raise money, charity for Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières. That's a charity of a wonderful organization, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and an extraordinary organization. I'm giving a plug for the charity that I do, and so I've done a lot of these, and I get a lot of questions, and I love them. And what's wonderful is now, after many years of doing it, it used to be that I could walk out on stage, and even before they started asking questions, I'd say 2.5 hours. Meaning, how long did my makeup take? And the audience would laugh, and they would know exactly, because that was a question that everyone would ask. And so, and the other thing, the technical questions that I sometimes get are related to the morphing technique and how that was done. And I'm no help there, because it's all done inside a computer. And so I'm as amazed by it as the audience is or was.
Now, Constable Odo, your biggest and best Star Trek performance. For 7 seasons, the shapeshifter went from not knowing anything about his people to eventually saving them in the series finale. What are your thoughts on the character arc that developed over all those stories?
When Rick Berman first spoke to me about the character, when I read the first script, as a character actor, as an actor who was trained in mask work and eventually taught mask work at Juilliard in the United States, but as a character actor, the thing that appealed to me about the character was not so much the fact that he was going to be able to morph into other things, although that was very appealing, but was the fact that he did not know who he was. And that I had a real that really resonated with me. I found that very interesting, and I found it kind of a wonderful, kind of almost allegorical sense of humanity, of human beings not really knowing deeply who they are. So that was very appealing to me. It was the most appealing to me about the character. And that was played to its fullest in the first season, maybe 2 seasons, I'm not even sure now. But there's a certain point where Ira Bear, who was running the show, and Rick came to me when we were about to start the next season, and they said, this season we're going to find out where Odo is from. And my initial reaction was not all that positive. I thought, oh, because people would say to me early on, oh, I want to know, I can't wait until we find out where he's from. And I would say, boy, I hope I never find out, because I just love that. That's so mysterious. But as usual, the writers really knew what was best. I knew that mine was not to question why, but just to do it to the best of my ability. And of course, it was a fascinating, that they kept doing that, not only to my character, but to a lot of the characters and to the audience, sort of taking you in a direction and then turning in another direction. And, for instance, I remember when they came and they said, now Odo is in love with Kira, and Nana, who is just a bosom buddy and an adorable person, we loved working with each other, always have, continue to be dear, dear friends. But we both went, what? Oh, okay. And then we acted it out, and it ended up being one of the sort of more meaningful story arcs. There are a lot of wonderful story arcs in Deep Space Nine, but in terms of Odo and Kira, that's a very strong one.
Gene had a very unique vision for Star Trek, but Ira Bear sort of took it in a bit of a darker path.
He did indeed.
Odo's DS9's Data or Spock, not quite sure of themselves, not quite sure how they fit into society. But the one character that Odo really responded to in quite an antagonistic way and an adversarial way was Quark. But I believe that you and Armin Shimmerman are quite good friends off camera. Was that fun to play?
It was really one of my favorite parts of doing the show. Armin and I are very dear friends. We had worked together in the theater. We both had a very similar kind of training, classical training. So we had a very similar work ethic. And so when we would work on scenes, there was a lot of shorthand involved, and we just knew what we were looking for and how we were going to work on it, and so that was very rich. It's always been kind of interesting to Armin and I. We've both commented on it at other times, that it's just wonderful that it is one of the things about the show that people seem to respond to very positively, and we're very aware that actually there was only one show, The Ascent, in which Odo and Quark were the central story and actually filled the entire story, basically. Most of the time, we had little scenes where I would walk into the bar and insult Quark, and then I'd walk out, or he would walk into my office and insult me, and I would go, harumph, and he would walk out, and people loved it. It's a classic kind of odd couple situation. It's not like we reinvented the wheel, but if the wheel works and doesn't wobble and fall off the cart, it's very gratifying, and it seems to have worked for the audience.
Yeah, it's a brilliant episode. Rene, thanks so much for sitting down and having some time with me straight off the plane. I hope you grab some rest and then enjoy the convention and all the fans this weekend at Oz Comic Con.
I hope so. Thank you very much.
And I've got to say a huge thanks to Oz Comic Con for giving me some time to sit down with their guests throughout the year, not just at Melbourne this weekend. It's a privilege, and I've met some amazing sci-fi alumni. Also, a thanks to Supernova as well for giving me some of their time as well. I didn't get a chance to check out their Sydney and Perth cons this past fortnight, but Brisbane is next in November, so I will be there for that, so stay tuned. The mission is to interview every sci-fi alumni in the world, in front of and behind the lens, and it will continue from new premises in the next few weeks. I've spent 4.5 years in this place and celebrated a few milestones, and I look forward to many more in the new digs. I've got space for a separate office and studio, so it's going to be pretty exciting. Be sure to like, follow and subscribe to Trekzone.org on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. The details are on screen. A huge thanks to Liam, Candice, Dave, Alan, Greg, Lisa, Ian, Keely, Mel and Damo. You guys know who you are, and I couldn't do what I do without your great support. Fred as well, mate. Thank you very much. This is the Trekzone Spotlight from Trekzone.org, Australia's first Star Trek fan site, going boldly since 2003.
September 1966. One opening monologue.
Space. The final frontier.
One unforgettable theme tune. September 2016. Trekzone.org will celebrate 50 years since the premiere. In a big way.